we are here in Stavanger for a reason. The Stavanger region have an opportunity to lead by example. Forus Energigjenvinning is the waste-to-energy plant and the biggest emission source of CO2 in the region. Audun Aspelund is the project manager at Forus Energigjenvinning and will give us the latest news on the CCS project. Please give Audun a warm welcome.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for Bellona for hosting. It's good to see people again. Hello, are you awake? There's a lot of presentations and it's fast, so okay. Basically, I will zoom in and zoom out, and I think that I also will sum up a lot of what's being said here today. So, in the middle here is actually the waste incineration plant, Forus Energigjenvinning. And I am the chairman there, and I'm also trying to get speed on capturing the CO2 from the plant. And when we started thinking, we saw that this will actually create a local CCS value chain, and I will talk about this in this presentation. Starting by zooming out on the world. About 3% of the world's CO2 emissions comes from waste. I actually believe that it could be more, but let's say 3% is still a lot. In Norway, it's higher. In Norway, it's 3.8%, even though we have a very well-functioning waste management system. This is because we don't have that much carbon-intensive industry, and we don't have, and we have a clean hydropower. So we zoom in a little bit more on south of Rogaland. And in south of Rogaland, you have about 7% of the CO2 emissions, or the climate emissions, comes from waste and sewer sludge. A lot of this is actually old landfills producing methane. And if we zoom a little bit further in, you can find the two plants in Forus Energigjenvinning that takes most of the waste that is available here and needs to be incinerated. It accounts for 3%. That's the fossil part within the numbers behind. And there's also 3% biogenic material that is not accounted for. When we add on different sources, a small increase in the waste incineration capacity, as well as CO2 from biogas production that's already captured, and CO2 from natural gas sweetening in Risavika before LNG production, we can actually create a value chain that has a 10% potential for the reduction in this region, whereas about 6 of these are biogenic. And this creates a lot of opportunities. So, zooming in on Forus Energigjenvinning and the largest point source that is necessary for this value change to happen, we have first the two waste incineration plants. Then we have gone into cooperation with Aker and Ivar to look on capture and liquefaction of the CO2. This process really needs, and I know they will be talking later, so I won't go into the details here. It needs a lot of energy in the form of heat, and we actually plan to use that heat for the district heating customers. So we need to find a way to be net positive when it comes to heat, and we've managed to do that. And this is very good news for us, and it's good news for waste incineration plants in Norway and in Europe. The next step is to collect the CO2 and transport it to a suitable harbor, and here represented by Risavika. That could be other places as well. The thing is that we need to transport it to a large-scale international transport and storage value chain. And there is a cost for transporting small amounts. When Northern Lights looked at the potential here, they literally sailed, pun intended, past Stavanger because we didn't have any large point sources of CO2. We had the Forus Energigjenvinning, about 50,000 was reported to MDR. It's actually 100,000 tons. But if we combine everything, we're up to 0.2 around this. This is the potential without doing anything drastic. And then it's in the range of, it's interesting, but it's not a large. And this is something that you will find in all cities of a size in Europe. There will be waste, there should be waste incineration, and you should capture the CO2, and this can be the foundation. Of course, if you have a large point emitter, that will be the founding father of the local CCS chain. Okay, but we need to take into account that the costs involved here depends on having, I'm using the laser once. We shouldn't sub-optimize here, okay? So the costs are, if you look at the low end here, 900 kroners. There's a lot of tailwind. I don't run, I'm a bike cyclist, and I know it's much, much easier when you've got a good tailwind. So, and the opposite direction, it's definitely possible to use even more money if you want to. We need to have the costs as low as possible. How did this compare? This is a former Prime Minister, and she said that I will increase the taxes on CO2 emissions from waste incineration plants to 2,000 kroners. And if that's not enough, I will raise to 3,000 kroners. So it makes sense, it's profitable. The thing is that somebody needs to pay that tax, or somebody needs to pay the costs for capturing and injecting the CO2. And this is very important, that we find what I call fair business models, so that so that we get the things moving and that it's fair. So we're working together with Bellona actually on what I've called now better business models. It could have been bring back better. That's for Equinor. But we have a hypothesis that waste to energy plus CCS is a license to operate thing in the future in Norway. And we set forward a work target that we will create business models that will make this work. And we're doing this with Bellona and Cicero and Aker Carbon Capture, and we have also what we call CAN, the Klimakur for avfallsforbrenningsanlegg in Norway. The waste incineration industry in Norway is also cooperating with us on this. So the vision is that this is the preferred solution, both from an environmental point of view, but also from an economy point of view. So how does this at glance look like? It's been said before, the technology is here. This is not the main challenge. Of course, there's work to be done. The economy is not there. Waste incineration is not part of the ETS program. So there's today absolutely no economic incentive to capture the CO2. Oh, that's not correct. There is a tax, and the tax accounts for less than 100 kroners per ton today from the fossil part. So that's just a tax. That doesn't promote change. Then you come to the legal framework, and I'll be explaining the concept of biogenic CO2 later on, but we need to have a framework for it, and I know people here, Horisont Energi is here, are working with this. And then it's for waste. We need to define what's biogenic and what's fossil from this waste. And this is not an easy task. I try to explain it in this way. When you throw a diaper, the fossil part is what's around the biogenic part. But this is not easy, and we need to have a framework. We need to know, because it's costly to build these plants. It's costly to build such a value chain, and we have a lot of uncertainty. And the last part is that the municipalities are actually owning the waste incineration plants, and most of the garbage is coming from municipalities, and they do this for selvkost. They're not allowed to make money on it, and this really complicates things. And we need to be aiming for both capturing CO2 from industrial waste and from municipality waste. And the last part that we should not forget, I've also been working a long, long time with CCS, and I don't reckon myself as a teenager, but we sometimes forget as good engineers social acceptance. And this is important because I think there's a will to contribute. There's definitely not a will to pay. And we need to recognize that the waste to energy is something that could be debated in EU, also CCS, and also negative emissions. It's not that easy. We need to spend the time, educate, and talk about this. Okay, and one last point here. How to share the costs will be very important. We live in a democracy. If we do things too expensively, people will react. If we share the burden the wrong way, people will react, and then everything will stop. So I think this is very important, that we should use time on this as well, not only technology. Okay, jumping one more step forward to the circular economy, and I've called it 50 shades of green, because it's really not that easy to know what's right and in which direction to do this. One example being, we should not throw a lot of waste to produce CO2 and then say that we have achieved our goals. We have sent a lot of CO2 to Northern Lights or Horisont Energi or somebody else. We need to do things right the first time. We shouldn't use as much as we do now. We know this. When we use it, we should use it once more, and we should go to Finn, and we should recycle and all of these things. It's very important to start there. And in this region, IVA, the local water and waste management system, they have done a lot of good things. We have 2 biogas plants, one from organic waste, one from sewer sludge. We have, of course, good recycling with paper and metals and such, and we have a relatively brand new, top-notch, modern plastic removal factory. And this is in place before we start to talk about CCS. The next step is then the possibility to capture CO2, and it enables us a few things. First of all, other players, other industries can deliver CO2. Then some industries can get biogenic CO2 for their processes. But there will be a surplus, and that needs to be transported out and injected. And we believe that this makes the most its impact on environment, not producing methanol, because that will be injected in the next phase. Okay. So trying to sum up now, the first step that we have the waste management system, that's good, the plastic removal. We have a waste incineration plant, or actually 2, and they are producing as much electricity as they can, and they're using most of the remaining heat to the district heating. And this is already millions of Norwegian kroners invested. This is already large industry, already employing a lot of people. The next step could be and should be to capture the CO2. We need to create a local value chain. We need to connect that in a good way to our international value chain, and that will increase the possibilities for greenhouses. We produce most of the cucumbers and tomatoes in Norway in this region, and they will need biogenic CO2. We could then take the CO2 from biogas, CO2 from natural gas sweetening, and that will increase the amount of CO2 and increase the negative emissions. And then the last part is that we could produce hydrogen in this region, if we want to, from natural gas and create blue hydrogen, from biogas and create red hydrogen. And we could, of course, produce turquoise hydrogen, and maybe, for most of you, the new color, gold hydrogen, which is from waste to energy, either through electricity or in a direct process, which will be for the future. Okay. So I will end by saying that transforming waste to power, hydrogen, heat, and negative emissions will not only reduce local and global emissions, it will also create value and workplaces. And with that, I want to end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Audun. We look forward to see your business model fly.